and one one-year-old black girl sat quietly in first class and was suddenly accused of being dangerous simply because of her presence. A baseless accusation, a moment that rocked the entire flight. And a mother, a remarkably calm CEO who brought the entire airport to a halt to protect her child. But let's stop for a second. If it were you when your child was seen as not belonging there just because of the color of their skin or because someone was carrying an invisible fear, would you choose to stay silent to keep peace, or would you choose to stand up even though you know? There will be a storm of prejudice ahead, and if it were you back then when you were young, when you were vulnerable, when just the wrong look could send your heart racing, did you ever experience the feeling of being judged before you could even say a word? Is that feeling still somewhere in your memory? This story is not just about a flight. It is about us, about old wounds, and about the choice to protect a child from the things adults sometimes forget to heal. If you're ready to embark on this emotional journey, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so we can begin the story together. The sound of jet engines echoed through the first-class cabin, steady as the breathing of a giant metal beast preparing to awaken. The seatbelt sign flickered and turned yellow, reflecting in the slightly confused eyes of one one-year-old black girl, Harper Johnson, as she sat down in seat 1A. Harper was petite and trim in a navy sweater. Her legs dangled slightly, not quite touching the floor. She hugged her small purple backpack to her chest, clutching it tightly as if it held a secret only she knew. Harper was trying to stay calm, even saying the words in her head. "Mom told you, you can do this. Sit still. Breathe. Don't let anyone freak you out." She opened the book, Astronomy for Kids, but after turning a few pages, a shadow fell beside her. A woman's voice, cold and slightly annoyed, rang out right next to his ear. "Honey, this is first class. Are you sure you're sitting in the right seat?" Harper looked up. Standing before her was Linda Carmichael, a white woman of about 54, her posture erect as if she had never stooped to pick up anything in her life. Her eyes were sharp, her lips were pursed, and her high heels clicked lightly on the floor, adding to the heavy atmosphere. Harper said softly, his voice like a breath, "Yes, this is my chair." Linda smiled slightly, but it was not a friendly smile. It was sharp as a glass blade. "Sweetheart, this is first class. This seat is not for kids, like you." The words "like me" made Harper pause. She didn't understand the full meaning, but she knew it wasn't good. She looked down at the e-ticket in her hand, then showed it to Linda. Linda glanced at it, but barely read it. Before Harper could say anything more, a flight attendant approached, smiling politely. "Hello, what's up?" Linda put her hands on her hips. "I want to know why a kid is sitting in seat 1A. This is first class, not summer camp." Harper wanted to run away from that gaze, but she remembered what her mother had told her. "Breathe in, breathe out. Don't shrink away. You have as much right to be there as anyone else." She tried to keep her voice calm. "My ticket is 1A. The flight attendant checked the information. A few seconds later, she smiled at Harper. "I'm sitting correctly. No problem." Linda was taken aback. Then she raised her eyebrows in contempt. "So I want to double-check. First-class tickets can't be this cheap. Something's wrong." The flight attendants maintained a professional attitude. "Valid ticket. Ma'am, we need you to return to your seat for takeoff." Linda glanced at Harper again as if her presence disrupted some invisible order she believed in, but she returned to seat 1C right next to Harper. The air was heavy. Harper tried to look out the window where the runway stretched out like a hazy strip of light in the morning sun. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat. Then the loudspeaker rang out. "Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." Harper breathed a sigh of relief. She thought it was over. But life wasn't that simple, especially when she was about to take an unexpected turn. Linda leaned over, covered her mouth, and spoke softly into the phone. Harper heard a few words, but each fell like ice water. Suspicious behavior, agitated child, possible trafficking, security risk. Harper froze. She didn't understand everything, but she did understand one thing. The woman was talking about her. The flight attendant in front of her received a signal from the cabin crew phone. She looked at Harper, not with suspicion but with concern for a child. Seconds later, the entire cabin fell silent. The engines stopped revving. The plane came to a halt. A cold announcement rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are pausing takeoff due to a security concern." Harper's heart pounded. She looked around. Some of the passengers began to whisper. A man said, "What's up?" Another woman looked straight at Harper and then turned away as if trying to avoid trouble. Linda crossed her arms, her face full of complacency. This, to her, was like world order restored. A black child could not run wild in first class. She believed she was doing the right thing, a dangerous belief. Another flight attendant approached her, voice discreet but serious. "Niece, can I see what's in your backpack?" Harper shivered slightly, but she remembered her mother's words. "If you ever feel unsafe, call me. Always." Harper took a deep breath. "Miss, can I call my mom? I feel a little worried." The flight attendant hesitated, but Harper's eyes spoke for her. She nodded and led Harper to the front of the cabin where there was a wall-mounted SAT phone for emergencies only. Harper dialed the number. The long beeps made her heart tighten. Then my mother's voice rang out deep and warm like a roof. "Harper, are you okay? What happened to the plane?" Harper bit her lip, her voice low as if afraid she would disappear. "Mom, someone told me it was dangerous. I don't know what to do." The plane stopped. On the other end of the line, Ava Johnson, the black CEO of Metasphere AI, sat up straight, but her voice remained soft. "Listen to me, Mom. You did nothing wrong. Mom is coming. Right now," Harper cried. But they were tears of faith. Because when Mom said, "I'm coming," nothing could stop her. She looked down at the phone. A small ray of hope filtered through her fear. Behind the cabin was gloomy as if all light had been swallowed up. A group of airport security guards entered the cabin. The sound of boots clicking on the wooden floor of first class startled the entire cabin. Harper was asked to sit back down. Linda looked on with a smug look, as if she had proven her point. But no one in the cabin knew that. The real storm had yet to begin. Ava Johnson stood up from her chair in her 32nd floor office, which overlooked the bright buildings of downtown Seattle. Her eyes were still glued to the computer screen where medical algorithms were constantly running. But everything stopped when she heard Harper's voice. She didn't cry out loud. Harper had never been one to sob. She was a swallower baby, the tears falling silently. It was that silence that sent a chill down Ava's spine. Harper said only 2 sentences. "Mom, they said I was dangerous. I don't know what happened." Ava placed her hands on the table, squeezing them gently to keep them from shaking. She could feel her own breathing change from even to shallow, but her voice remained soft like a blanket wrapped around her child. "Harper, listen to me. No one is allowed to touch you. No one is allowed to decide who you are. I'm coming." She took a deep breath just like Ava had taught her. Back in Seattle, Ava closed her eyes for a few seconds, trying to keep her heart from collapsing in fear. Little did she know that at Denver Airport, where Harper was sitting in seat 1, things had gone far beyond a misunderstanding. The airport had activated a security hold, temporarily closing the runway while security assessed the risk. A very serious action. Ava opened her tablet and quickly typed in the internal code for the airline her company was working on. But she stopped mid-sentence. Ava was the CEO. But right now she was simply a mother who had to get to her child by any means necessary. Ava picked up the landline. "Marcus, get the car out now. We're at Denver Airport in 20 minutes. Marcus Hill, the driver and longtime assistant, said calmly, "Yes, I'm coming, ma'am. No questions, no hesitation." He knew when Ava raised her voice it meant someone had just touched something no one was supposed to touch Harper. In first class, things were spiraling out of control. Harper crouched down, trying to stay calm. She felt like everyone in the cabin was staring at her. Some were curious, some were averting their gazes. One, triumphant. Linda Carmichael. She adjusted her coat, fastening the buttons as if she were assuming some sort of natural authority. Her expression was that of someone who had just pulled the alarm and was now waiting for recognition. An airport security officer entered the cabin. He carried a notebook and a small camera strapped to his chest. He bowed slightly to the chief flight attendant. "Who reports suspicious passenger behavior?" Linda raised her hand immediately. "It's me. I think this girl is being exploited or hiding something. She's very agitated." Harper turned her small shoulders, tightening. "I'm not excited. I'm just waiting for the plane to take off." Linda pouted. "You just say that. I hear you mumbling things all the time. And—" she lowered her voice as if talking about a crime. A child traveling first class alone was unusual. The air was thick. Harper bowed her head. Even though she didn't understand everything, she knew that her being here, in seat 1A, was not normal in someone's eyes. The guard opened the book. What is your name? Da. Harper Johnson. Are you going alone? Yes. Who bought the ticket for me? My mother, Ava Johnson. The guard stopped writing. He looked up. Ava Johnson, CEO of Metasphere AI Harper, nodded slightly, as if saying her mother's name made her feel less scared. In the cabin, several passengers glanced at each other. They had heard that name many times, in the news, in the medical industry, in AI technology. Linda chuckled. Who knows? Kids these days are good at making up stories. A name doesn't prove anything. The guard frowned. Linda's attitude was starting to become more obvious than usual. He turned to the flight attendant. Can we confirm information regarding the child's guardian? The flight attendant nodded. We're on the intercom. And her mother just called headquarters. A slight cracking sound came from Linda's direction. It was like someone had knocked a piece of her confidence away. But she tried to keep calm. So what if his mother is the CEO doesn't mean he can fly first class without being checked? A middle-aged male passenger spoke up, his voice calm. Ma'am, I'm sitting in the back. I've seen her sitting still since we got on the plane. She hasn't caused any trouble. Linda waved her hand. You don't understand. Things like this, you have to be observant. I was just doing my civic duty. Harper clasped her hands together, her palms wet. She listened to every word they said, not understanding everything but feeling as if the whole world was weighing her worthiness to sit there. The guard turned to Harper, his voice softening. Harper, do you feel unsafe? Is anyone threatening you? Harper shook his head slightly. Then he said softly, I just want to see my mom. On the other side of town, Ava's black SUV was speeding down the highway, its tires streaking in the sunlight. Ava sat in the back seat, her hands clasped together in front of her face. She took a deep breath, the same rationality she always had when making decisions in a conference room. But this time is different, very different. Ava is not a CEO. She is not assessing risks or analyzing data. She is a mother running to her child. Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror. Do you want me to call airport security first? Ava opened her eyes. Call. Tell them to hold everyone in place. I want to look into the eyes of the person who scared my child. 25 minutes later, at the Denver airport, Ava's car pulled up to a special security gate. Airport staff recognized her almost immediately, not because Ava was famous, but because she was the one mentioned in the internal meeting less than 20 minutes ago. They led her away quickly, not VIP style, but the kind that everyone understood. There's a mother looking for her child. As Ava boarded the plane, the first-class cabin fell into absolute silence. Harper jumped up from her chair and ran to her mother. Ava knelt down and pulled her into a hug. It wasn't rushed or frantic, it was deep, firm, as if they were trying to hold each other from a storm. Harper whispered in her mother's ear. Am I doing right, Mom? I don't want to cause trouble. Ava squeezed her son's shoulder, speaking slowly, but loud enough for the whole compartment to hear. Harper, you have the right to sit wherever you have a ticket. No one, I repeat, no one, can say you don't deserve it. Linda turned her face away, but her hand was shaking slightly. Ava stood up, her eyes half cold. The other half remained gentle as she looked at her child. She turned to the security team. I want to know. Who reported my daughter as a threat? Linda swallowed. Then she lifted her chin as if to hold on to her last bit of power. I'm the one who reported it. I followed my hunch. A child, looking like that. Being so poor, sitting in first class. She did not finish her sentence. Ava took a step forward. No yelling, no screaming. She spoke softly enough to keep her daughter from panicking, but strong enough to keep the cabin's breaths from escaping. She didn't see who the girl was. She only saw the color of her skin. The cabin was suddenly silent. Everyone understood that this was no longer a story about a child. It was a story about prejudice. Harper stood behind her mother, holding onto Ava's coat as if clinging to the only safe place. Ava looked straight at Linda, and she grounded the plane. She made my daughter cry. She put the entire flight on security hold. Just because you think, a black kid can't sit in seat 1, Linda turned pale. I didn't say that. Ava cut in, soft but sharp. She didn't need to speak. She acted. The security team glanced at each other. They had the answer they needed. But Ava wasn't finished yet. You know my child has been practicing for months to gain the confidence to fly alone. And yet, just one look from you, she thinks she did something wrong. Ava slowly bent down to Harper's level. You did nothing wrong, Harper. Your smallness is never an excuse for anyone to put you down. Harper nodded, eyes red. Then Ava straightened. Her back was straight, her eyes strong, but still holding her characteristic calm. She told the security team, I want a statement. I want it on record that this passenger made a false report, and I want to be present when she explains why. Linda opened her mouth to protest, but Ava's gaze made her swallow her words. The cabin began to sense. The real confrontation had just begun. Before Ava even set foot on the plane, before Harper even sat trembling in seat 1, Linda Carmichael's world had begun to fall apart, long before. But no one on Delta Flight 482 knew that. They only saw the final version, cold, unpleasant, and bitter. They didn't see the rocky road that had led Linda to that moment. That morning, Linda woke up in a small apartment in Boulder, Colorado, not far from Denver. It was not the same apartment she had lived in for the past 20 years. The large house she had been proud of, with its thick carpets, large windows, and private office, had been sold 3 months earlier. 3 months. Only 3 months. But to Linda, it felt like 3 long years. Linda was a senior human resources director at Beverly Ridge Corporation, a well-known financial firm in the area. There she got used to traveling in first class, used to fancy networking dinners, used to the feeling of having the power to grant, the power to approve, the power to decide the fate of others. Then the company restructured. Linda no longer had a desk, no longer had an assistant, no longer had an L. Carmichael at Beverly Ridge email, just a cardboard box with a few framed photos, an old coffee cup, and an envelope that said, "We appreciate your contributions." The slip left Linda devastated. The most painful thing was that no one cared. Linda tried to get back on her feet, take new classes, get new jobs. But at 54, the world wasn't opening its doors to her as easily as it had before. What remained in her was not hope, but bitterness. A simmering bitterness made Linda see the world through the lens of unfairness. And when people feel the world is unfair to them, they often find someone smaller, weaker, more blameworthy to blame that feeling on. This morning, Linda chose to fly to New York to stay with an old friend for a few weeks, to escape Boulder, to escape the pitying looks, to escape the fact that everything she had ever held was slipping away so fast she could barely breathe. She chose first class with the remaining miles, the only thing that reminded Linda that she had been in a different position. As she passed through the VIP gate, Linda looked around and thought, at least this place is still mine. Linda needed that feeling, needed to know that she was still somebody. And then she saw Harper, a small black girl wearing a simple sweater holding a purple backpack without parents. Linda stopped as she passed by. A thought flashed through her mind. A thought as cold and sharp as broken glass. Why is a kid like that sitting in first class? No one said it. No one suggested it. But prejudice doesn't need to be taught. It just needs a space in people's hearts to take hold. Linda kept walking, but her steps were heavier. Anger welled up inside her, and she didn't understand why. Angry at the world, angry at life, angry that she was no longer valued, angry that Harper had somehow reminded her of how much she had lost. And so, Harper became the target, an invisible target, a shadow that Linda poured all her bitterness onto without even realizing it. Back in first class, Linda sat down in seat 1C, right next to Harper. From that moment on, she began to observe her with a critical eye. Harper held the book. Linda felt different. Harper swung her legs. Linda felt inappropriate. Harper breathed heavily with excitement. Linda felt suspicious. Not because Harper did anything wrong, but because Linda was looking at her through the glass of her own bitterness. Some people are not evil. They are just hurt. So hurt that they can no longer distinguish between their true feelings and their own prejudices. Linda is that kind of person. She picked up the phone, her hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from a turmoil of emotions. Anger at the world, anger at herself, anger at everything that made her feel small. She whispered into the phone, her eyes still fixed on Harper. "I want to report a suspicious passenger. This child doesn't seem normal. I suspect human trafficking." As soon as she finished speaking, Linda felt a twisted sense of relief. That sense of power she had felt in Beverly Ridge returned, if only for a few seconds. Someone is listening to her. Someone is doing what she says. Someone is taking her words seriously. Harper glanced at her. There was no hatred or resistance in her eyes, just confusion and fear. The twist of the story is here Linda didn't see that look. Or rather, Linda had forgotten how to look at others without looking through glasses of prejudice. When the security team entered, Linda felt validated. The looks that turned to her, whether curious or annoyed, made Linda feel weighty. That is man's most dangerous moment. When he mistakes attention for correctness, Harper was questioned. She answered. Harper had done nothing wrong. But Linda had gone too far to turn back. She just folded her arms, continuing to project her image as a protector of order. Protector, no. Linda was just trying to protect what she thought she had. And as Ava boards the plane, Linda realizes something: she's picked the wrong person to take her bitterness out on. Because Ava is not the type to back down. Ava is not the type to be afraid of confrontation. Ava is not the type to let anyone scare her daughter. The way Ava looked at Linda, so calm it was frightening, made Linda feel like someone had just pulled back a curtain revealing everything she tried to hide. But deep inside Linda, there was a very thin layer of shame. A fleeting feeling, but real. Linda looked at Harper, who was holding her mother's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. And for the first time, Linda felt a slight pang in her heart. An emotion that is not easy to name. No remorse, no regrets. It just hurt. It hurt in a different way. It hurt to realize I had just touched a child who didn't deserve to be treated like this. But Linda couldn't admit it. Not in front of Ava, not in front of the eyes watching her. She turned away. But inside, a very small crack had begun to form. A rift that Ava, with composure, will gradually widen in later installments. The first-class cabin was as quiet as the morning after a snowfall. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Linda sat motionless, her hands clasped in her lap. Little did she know that this moment would be the biggest turning point of her life, a direct blow to the mask she had worn for so long. And the scariest thing is, this time, Linda can't run away. Ava stood there. Harper stood there. The truth stood there. And the plane cannot take off until the truth is revealed. The morning before the flight, Atlanta was foggy. The sun had not yet fallen on the wide streets in front of the house. Harper sat in front of the door, purple backpack neatly placed at her feet, her hands clasped together as if waiting for something very important. The Johnsons' home wasn't big, but it was warm. Not the luxury of the powerful, but the warmth of a family that had learned to love through storms. Ava wanted her daughter to live in peace, even if the world outside wasn't always so gentle. Ava stepped out, adjusting her son's collar. Harper smiled slightly. "Mom, I'm fine." Ava looked at her for a second longer than she should have. Not because Harper was okay, but because in that moment her daughter looked much older than her 11 years. Ava hugged her child. Her voice was soft, but had the firmness of a woman who had been through much in life. "This is your first time flying alone. If you feel anything is wrong, anything at all, call me. Remember that." Harper nodded. She never argued with her mother's words, not out of fear, but out of trust. The familiar car horn sounded outside. It was Marcus Hill, the driver who had worked for Ava's family for over 10 years, almost like an uncle to Harper. He always greeted Harper with a gentle smile and kind eyes. Harper climbed into the car, her backpack beside her. Ava sat in the front, turning to look at her child in the mirror. "Do you want anything else to eat today? Mom prepared some cake and apples." Harper smiled, taking a granola bar from her pocket. Mom always brought food with her as if she were a child. Ava raised an eyebrow. "I'm still a baby." The whole car burst into laughter. That laughter Harper had no idea would become the thing she remembered most of that day. The Atlanta airport was busy this morning, but not chaotic. Harper liked watching the people go by, the rolling suitcases, the hurried footsteps, the familiar loudspeakers calling names. Marcus walked beside Harper, slower than usual, to make her feel safe. When I got to the check-in counter, a young staff member smiled. "Hi, son. Are you going alone?" Harper nodded, handed over her ID and ticket. The agent looked at the information for a long moment. There was nothing bad in her eyes, just a tiny trace of suspicion, the kind of unconscious suspicion you get when you see a black kid sitting in first class. Oh, first class. What a surprise. Before Harper could process what that meant, Ava stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She said clearly, her ticket was valid. I bought it, and she was fully briefed. The staff was startled and quickly smiled. "No, it's okay. It's just that you're so cute that I wanted to ask." Marcus stood back and watched. He understood that Ava didn't mean to blame anyone but to keep Harper from feeling like she had to explain her eligibility. There are things adults do for children that children will never know. Through security, Harper raised both hands and placed his backpack on the tray as Marcus instructed. The TSA agent checked, looked at the backpack and asked, "What's in here?" "Yes, books, and a pencil case." The staff scanned again and smiled more gently than the staff at the check-in counter. "Everything is fine. Let's go." Harper nodded, but her eyes were wandering around more. Not because she was afraid, but because everything seemed unfamiliar. Ava walked beside her, her hand always close to her child's, not touching. To make Harper feel independent, but not leaving either. To make Harper feel protected. When he reached the boarding gate, Marcus stopped. "I have to go back now." "But Harper." Harper looked up. Her eyes widened, waiting for Marcus to continue. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just be yourself. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Harper bit her lip, feeling a heat in her chest she couldn't name. She nodded. "Yes, I promise." Ava bent down and kissed her son on the forehead. "Mom stood watching me board the plane from the window. She didn't go anywhere until the plane took off." Harper hesitated for a moment. There was something vague, unsettling about it, like when the sky was overcast, even though it hadn't rained yet. But Harper tried to smile. "We are strong. It's okay, Mom." Ava smiled, softly touching her child's hair. Being strong isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and still moving forward. You can do it. Harper hugged her mother tightly, then turned and walked to the boarding gate. Her small shoes clicked lightly on the floor, her steps both tense and determined. On the way down the ramp, Harper felt truly alone for the first time. No mother by her side, no Marcus, no one calling her name. Harper looked out the window along the duct. The plane appeared white with a blue logo, wings spread like a bird about to take to the sky. Harper said to himself, "I can do it." Mom said so. She took a deep breath, steadying her pace. But as she entered first class, Harper paused slightly. Not out of fear, but out of awe. Wide seats, white towels, a glass of water. Not like economy where she had sat when she traveled with her mother. Harper gave her boarding pass to the flight attendant. She smiled, 1A. "Today I am the youngest passenger in that compartment." Harper blushed. Not because she was embarrassed, but because she felt different. The moment Harper sat down in seat 1A, the most normal thing in the world, turned into a story that no one expected. A small breath escaped her. Harper hugged her backpack and placed Astronomy for Kids on the table. She looked out the window, imagining what it would be like to see the sky from above. Little did she know that flight would not take her to the sky like the previous times. Which brings her into the biggest collision of her life, where Harper must face things that children should not bear. And when Linda appeared at 1C, pulling a suitcase with the authority of someone used to giving orders in a conference room, Harper could only bend down and touch the page of the book to keep calm. The peace of the Atlanta morning, Marcus's words, his mother's smile all faded as Linda turned her scrutiny, covering Harper like a layer of cold dust. Just a few words, just a few minutes of meeting, but it was enough to change the whole flight. And in that 1A, 1C moment, Harper didn't know that he was not just a passenger, which becomes the focus of something bigger. A confrontation no one wants but cannot avoid. A confrontation that Harper is only in the first chapter. The first-class cabin of Delta Flight 482 that morning felt like a familiar luxury cream, leather seats warm yellow lighting the soft tap of suitcases being stowed in the overhead bin. It was quiet enough to hear the sound of paper as Harper turned the pages of her book, a very American piece. But peace can sometimes be as fragile as a lake. A single drop of a stone can shatter the surface into ripples. And the stone entered the compartment in the 3rd minute. Harper was opening page 23 of Astronomy for Kids when she heard the steady click of high heels on the wooden floor. Not loud, but sharp, the kind of sound that makes you turn around in spite of yourself. She remained seated, but her eyes glanced over the edge of her book when the woman appeared in the aisle, Linda Carmichael. Linda was dragging a small black suitcase, her coat collar turned up, her blonde hair tied back. Her eyes scanned the cabin, as was the habit of people used to being in positions of power, judging everything by old instincts. Then his eyes stopped on Harper. Harper leaned in a little closer. Somehow, even without speaking, she sensed that this woman was different from the other passengers. Linda walked over to seat 1C right next to Harper and paused before sitting down. She looked Harper over the casual sweater, the braided hair, the slightly worn purple backpack, the children's book. It wasn't an overtly malicious look, but it carried a layer of invisible judgment that Harper, even at her young age, could sense. Linda tilted her head. "Sweetheart, this is first class. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Harper looked up, still holding the page to keep it from shaking. "Yes, this is my chair." Linda squinted like someone who had just heard something that didn't make sense. Harper held out the e-ticket. Linda glanced at it without really looking at it. "Seat 1A, Linda said, her voice dry as dust on old documents. "I've never seen a child in this seat before. It makes me curious." Harper didn't know how to respond. She didn't think Linda was wrong. It was true children rarely sat in first class. But Harper also felt something was wrong. A feeling that children often experience, but adults often ignore, the feeling of being not seen as they are. Harper took a deep breath as her mother had taught her. She opened her mouth to speak when a flight attendant approached. "Hello, how can I help you?" Linda turned to the flight attendant, speaking clearly as if reporting. "I want to know why a child is sitting in seat 1A. Is there a mistake?" The flight attendant looked at Harper, then opened her tablet. It took her only 3 seconds to confirm. "No mistake. The child's ticket is valid." Linda let out a short laugh like the sound of glass clinking. "Valid first-class ticket, not cheap." Harper clenched her hands. Not out of fear, but because the feeling of being slighted hurt her chest. The flight attendant kept a polite smile. "Yes, ma'am. The baby's mother bought the ticket for him. Everything is correct." Linda pursed her lips. She said nothing more. But her eyes remained fixed on Harper as if she were wondering. "Why me?" Harper turned back to the book, but the page no longer had bright planets but only faint white smudges. She felt her heart beat faster. She didn't understand why one word made her feel so small. The cabin door closed. Flight attendants walked around the cabin checking seat belts. Harper tried to look out the window to calm himself. Out there, the runway stretched like a road to new places. Harper thought of her mother. She must be standing behind some glass watching the plane prepare to take off. She smiled a little, reassuring herself. Everything would be okay. Harper believed so, but Linda did not let that peace last. As the plane began to taxi slowly, Linda leaned over, her voice low but loud enough for Harper to hear. "Are you going alone?" "Without an adult." Harper nodded. "Yes. I go visit my dad." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Visit Dad? Who will buy the first-class ticket for me?" Harper swallowed, not wanting to say too much about her mother because she didn't want to hear any more implied comments like, "A kid like me is allowed to sit here," but she still answered her, voice small but clear. "My mother bought it." Linda smiled. "Oh, you don't look like the first-class type." Harper looked down, her lips pursed. She didn't answer. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she didn't want to say anything. That was the moment the chief flight attendant approached again, checking the phone in Linda's hand. "You need to put me on airplane mode." Linda put away the phone, but her eyes still held discomfort. "I'm just checking my email." "I'm worried there's a problem in this row." Harper felt like someone was squeezing her shoulder without touching her. Especially when Linda continued, "I think this girl is a bit unusual. She keeps looking around. A child of unknown origin sitting here. I find it a bit suspicious." Harper looked up, her eyes wide. Unknown source. She had never heard anyone say that about her before. The girl wanted to say that her mother was the CEO. She wanted to say that she had done nothing wrong, but the words were stuck in her throat, unable to come out. "Flight attendants, keep calm." "No problem. Baby is in good condition. Please fasten your seatbelt." Linda sighed heavily, as if offended that no one was listening to her. "Okay. I'm just saying I find it dangerous. No one wants to be on the news because of a strange kid." The words hit Harper like a cold needle. She turned to the window, trying to hide her burning face. There are words that don't hurt right away, but they make children wonder, did I do something wrong? Am I that different? Harper bit her lip, her hand clutching the corner of her shirt. She remembered her mother's words. "You don't have to prove yourself worthy. You just have to be true to yourself." But now, in the middle of a strange airplane cabin, that advice was harder to keep than Harper thought. The plane continued to taxi, but suddenly stopped. Suddenly, the loudspeaker's voice rang out, serious and cold. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are pausing takeoff due to a safety concern." There was no screaming, no yelling, only a fearful murmur that filled the cabin like a cold wind. Harper's eyes widened. She had no idea what was happening. All she knew was, all eyes were on Rose, 1A, 1C. Especially when Linda slowly raised her hand. I'm the one who reported it. I think she might endanger the flight. The cabin seemed to break into a silence. Harper couldn't breathe. Not because she was afraid of being caught, but because she didn't understand why an adult would say that about her. Questions began to run through her head one by one like little flashing lights. Am I considered dangerous? I was just sitting in the right seat? Or shouldn't I be sitting here? Harper felt her hands grow cold. She turned to the flight attendant, her voice shaking like paper. Teacher, can I call my mom? The flight attendant looked into those tearful eyes. Then she nodded slightly. Girl, follow me. Harper stood up. Her steps felt heavier than ever, as if the floor of the plane was holding her back, but Harper went anyway. Even though she was scared, even though she was confused, she followed the flight attendant toward the satellite phone at the front of the cabin. Because Harper has one belief. Just hearing Mom's voice, I'll be fine. But Harper didn't know that. The moment she pressed the button to call her mother was the moment Ava decided to change the entire trajectory of that day. Not just for Harper, but for the whole flight. Harper stood next to the satellite phone mounted on the wall of the first-class cabin. The emergency light above was flashing a faint red, but to her it sounded more like her heart was racing than a safety signal. She pressed her mother's number, each number sounding heavier than usual. Behind her, airport security spoke to the chief flight attendant, their voices low and tense. Harper caught the words, protocol hold risk evaluation. Words she didn't understand but knew weren't good. The phone rings. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Then her voice rang out, low, slow, and very clear. Harper, are you okay? Tell me. Harper tried to hold back tears, but her voice still trembled. Some people say I'm dangerous. People look at me strangely. The plane has stopped, Mom. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Only a few seconds, but it was enough for Harper to sense that her mother was trying her best to remain calm. Harper, take a deep breath for me. Harper did as she was told. A deep breath, then a slow exhale, just like Ava had taught her so many times. Okay, now listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. This was never your fault. I'm coming. Don't be afraid, Harper hiccuped. Not from panic, but from knowing she wasn't alone. The chief flight attendant stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Harper's shoulder, the way an adult would comfort a child without saying a word. We'll leave you here for a while. Don't worry. Your mother is in touch with us. Harper nodded. In the first-class cabin, the air seemed to thicken. Linda sat up straight, arms crossed, eyes full of self-satisfaction. She looked as if she had done the right thing, as if she was the only one who saw the problem and no one else could. A passenger in seat 2B whispered to the person sitting next to him, I think she is a good girl. She doesn't cause any trouble. The other nodded. I see too. He just reads books. Linda turned back, hearing the conversation. She raised her eyebrows. You two have no idea. I've seen this kind of thing before. Trafficked children or dangerous children often look so nice. The other passenger frowned. You are exaggerating. Linda waved her hand. The all-too-familiar voice of someone she knew ordered, I was just doing the responsible thing. The plane was packed. If something happened, who would be responsible? The words responsibility, and what if something happens rang out, like the sound of knives cutting through the air. Below, the flight crew is doing many things at once times. Call security. Asterisk review. Linda's report. Asterisk. Explain to the pilot that the flight cannot take off. Asterisk. Comfort worried passengers. The chief flight attendant had just finished an internal call when the security team entered the cabin. Everyone's eyes immediately turned to them. The group leader, a security guard in his 42nds, held an electronic board with trouble codes. He went to row 1A, 1C. Who reports suspicious passengers? Linda stood up immediately without waiting for anyone to ask again. I could see she was not well. She kept looking around. She was mumbling something. I was worried she might be dangerous. The chief flight attendant tried to control his voice. Mrs. Carmichael, the little girl, was perfectly normal. This was just an one-year-old girl visiting her father. Linda pursed her lips, not letting go. A child that age, traveling first class alone without parents. Isn't that suspicious? Security officer asked. When did you start to feel unusual? From the moment I saw it, it looked away from me. Then, it hugged its backpack to its chest and wouldn't let go. The security guard tilted his head. A kid, carrying a backpack, is normal, Linda replied very quickly. No, not for me. That sentence seemed to reveal her true thoughts. A seemingly small thought, but it explained why she looked at Harper as something wrong. In the hold, Harper looked back from the front of the cabin, clutching the straps of her coat. No one was saying she was wrong, but everything that was happening made Harper feel like a troublemaker. That's what the chief flight attendant worries about. Most children easily believe that the fault lies with them, even when they have done nothing wrong. She moved closer to Harper, bending down to eye level. I'm fine. We just need to follow the procedure. Mom is on her way. Harper nodded slightly. His heart was still pounding. Behind her, Harper saw Linda talking to the security team, her voice sharper. If there is any risk that you miss, are you responsible? The security guard replied, his voice annoyed. Ma'am, we can tell the difference between a confused child and a real threat. Linda stepped back, but her face still showed defiance. I just hope you don't make mistakes. Just then, the flight crew's intercom rang. The chief flight attendant ran over and answered the phone. She turned back, her eyes full of surprise. The baby's mother is on her way. She asked everyone to stay put and not let the baby down. Some passengers exclaimed, "Oh my God, is it coming? How soon?" Another asked, "Who is she?" The flight attendant replied, since there was no longer any reason to keep it a secret. Ava Johnson, CEO of Metasphere AI. The atmosphere in the cabin changed dramatically. A few passengers recognized the name. Linda flinched slightly, a reaction no one else could fully see. But Harper did. She saw the pause in Linda's eyes, even if it was only for a split second. And that was the first time Harper felt the woman was beginning to understand that she had gone too far. The pilot announced over the loudspeaker, "Flight attendants, stand down. The aircraft will remain grounded until further notice." The cabin was buzzing, but Harper stood still, not crying, not reacting, just standing, her hands on the cold wall, trying to stay calm. The girl whispered, "Mom is here. Mom is here." And at the back of the cabin, security was opening the plane door to welcome the woman, causing the entire airport to adjust its schedule. Just one person, one mother, one woman. But that person is Ava Johnson. A calm storm just touched down on the runway. When Ava's personal phone rang a second time, she was standing in the middle of Metasphere AI's control room. In front of her was a 3D model of the remote control system for medical devices, the final update before the market launch. The engineering team stood still, watching Ava's face to figure out what was going on. Ava didn't answer right away. She just stood there, her hands on the edge of the table, her eyes closed. The room fell silent. When Ava opened her eyes, they were as bright as steel sparks. Simulation off, meeting adjourned. Her voice was not loud, not urgent, but no one dared to disobey. The whole engineering team looked at each other. No one knew what was going on, but everyone felt one thing: something big was happening. Ava pressed the redial button. There was a faint hum of the plane, and Harper's voice, tremulous and hoarse, came to her ear. "Mom, they say I'm suspicious. Did I do something wrong, Mom?" Ava gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. But her voice, when it came out, was slow and steady, like a blacksmith holding a red-hot knife. "Listen, Harper, you're not wrong. Not at all. Just stay calm. I'll be there. Mom, they look at me like Harper's voice choked. "Like you're about to do something bad," Ava finished very softly. Then she lowered her voice even more. "But the truth is, they fear what they don't understand. Not you. And I will never let you stand alone in the face of other people's fear." Harper held his breath, listening to every word. Ava switches to a business voice, sharp and structured. "Let me speak to the chief stewardess." A moment later, a woman's voice rang out, polite but tense. "I'm Michelle, chief flight attendant of Delta Flight 482. I'm Ava Johnson, Harper's mother." Ava's voice wasn't high, but it made Michelle immediately adjust her posture. Michelle reacted as if she were talking to someone with real power. Not the power of a position, but the power of quiet confidence. Ava asked directly, without beating around the bush, "What is my daughter accused of?" Michelle took a deep breath. A passenger said Harper was acting dangerous, but from the crew's observation, she was completely normal. "We are keeping the situation as it is to avoid any misunderstanding." There was a very short silence. Ava said, "I would like to ask that all passengers remain as they are. Do not remove the child. And do not separate her from the flight. I am coming." Michelle was a little confused. "But ma'am, where are you? The flight is I'm 4 minutes from the airport. Keep my baby there." The last sentence wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A promise strong enough to steady Harper's heart. Ava hung up the phone and turned to the engineering team, her voice calm again, but her eyes were no longer the same as before. "The meeting continues later." Then she turned to her personal assistant, "Call Marcus. The car is here. I need to be at the airport in 7 minutes." "Ava, what's wrong?" the assistant asked, genuinely worried. A breath. Ava raised her eyes and spoke in a voice no one dared to doubt. "My daughter is being discriminated against on a flight with the cabin door closed." The room was silent. No one dared to ask more. Ava walked quickly down the hallway, her high heels clicking rhythmically on the wooden floor like a tactical clock counting down. Marcus was waiting in a shiny black SUV. The door opened. Ava got in. The car sped away. Marcus glanced at the rearview mirror. "What's wrong with Harper, ma'am?" Ava looked out the window, her eyes on the airport in the distance. "They said the girl was suspicious." Marcus frowned. "Harper. She just hugs her books and forgets to eat." Ava pursed her lips. They look at her and see what they want to see, not who she really is. Marcus was silent for a few seconds, then said, "Do you want me to prioritize speed or safety?" Ava replied, "Safely, and as quickly as possible." Marcus understood what that meant. The car accelerated, but not recklessly. Marcus drove much like Ava, lived her life assertive, but not unconventional. In the car, Ava leaned back in her seat, breathing evenly. No panic, no outburst of anger. But in her heart, there is a suppressed emotion, the fear she knew as a child, the feeling of being seen as a threat just because of the color of her skin, the feeling of being judged before her name was even asked. She tried to push it down, but memories have a tenacity of their own. Ava remembers the days when her mother held her hand tightly while going to the supermarket, while getting on the bus, while walking next to white men who looked at her strangely. She remembered her mother saying, "You can't always change their minds. But you can keep yourself safe until you're strong enough to change it." Today, Ava is no longer a child with her head bowed. Today, Ava is the one to change that. Those thoughts didn't soften Ava. They steadied her. The voice in her head, low and clear, whispered, "No one can make her feel small. No one." Ava took a deep breath, opened her eyes, and regained her CEO sharpness. The car entered the VIP area of the airport. Marcus stopped right in front of the door. Ava stepped down, the evening wind blowing through her hair. Dark dress, long coat, and eyes that made anyone who looked at them understand. This is the woman who did not come to apologize, but to demand justice. The 3 security guards at the door immediately stood up straight. "Mrs. Johnson," Ava nodded slightly. "Yes. Take me to the plane," the tour guide said as he walked. "We have kept all passengers as you requested. The flight crew is cooperating." But what? The woman who reported the incident was not very cooperative. Ava smiled slightly. Not a happy smile. "I don't expect her to cooperate." As Ava stepped onto the ramp leading into the plane, the atmosphere changed immediately. Michelle, the chief stewardess, was the first to see her, half relieved, half nervous. Ava nodded in thanks. "Thanks for keeping her safe." "We always will, ma'am." Ava didn't answer. She walked into the first-class cabin. The whole cabin was silent. Some passengers recognized Ava and were slightly startled. The rest just felt a very strong force that they couldn't name. Harper stood by the cabin wall, her face worried but brightening when she saw her mother. "Mom," Harper rushed over. Ava held out her arms for her child, holding him tight, but her hands were shaking a little, for the first time in years. "You did well. You're not alone." Harper buried her face in her mother's shirt. "Mom, I'm scared." Ava stroked her child's hair. "I know, but I'm here." That moment, though brief, made some passengers look down suddenly, feeling guilty even though they did nothing. Behind Linda stood up, her voice trembling slightly. I was just doing the right thing. There was no need to make such a fuss." Ava turned back. Her gaze was not aggressive, not loud, not spiteful, but it was sharp, so sharp that Linda had to take half a step back. Ava took a few steps forward, hugging Harper next to her. "Mrs. Carmichael." Ava's voice was low and clear enough for the whole compartment to hear. "My daughter is a child. not someone you can attack with your fear. Linda blushed. I just doubt it because— For what? Ava asked softly. Because a black child sat in first class, or because you think you have the right to decide who sits where? Linda opened her mouth but said nothing. Ava continued, slowly, deeply, without a hint of loss of control. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to protect my child, and to remind you that fear is no excuse for discrimination. The only sound in the cabin was Harper's soft breathing. Ava squeezed her son's hand. Now then, we'll let the facts speak for themselves. Ava turned to the security guard. I want this woman's entire statement, her entire words, and her entire behavior recorded, starting with her false reporting which caused the flight to be stopped. Linda turned pale and stammered. I didn't know it would turn out like this, Ava interrupted, in a voice so soft it was frightening. But she chose to do so, and the cabin was completely silent. A storm is coming. But it didn't rumble. It was quiet. So quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. The first-class cabin of Delta Flight 482 is no longer a place of gentle magazine page-turning or the steady hum of air conditioning. That space is now like a closed room holding the breath of nearly 20 people, each with different emotions but all pointing to the same point, the truth. Ava stood there, still holding Harper's hand. Not tense, but not to be taken lightly. The security team was in position. Michelle, the chief flight attendant, stood near the cabin wall, her face a mixture of worry and relief. And Linda. Linda was still facing Ava, but for the first time her eyes didn't hold the empty confidence they'd always held. A small recording desk was set up in the cabin, as is the procedure for reporting false accusations or passenger disturbances. 2 security guards prepared recording equipment. Every word would be recorded. Ava didn't look at the recorder. She just looked at Linda, and Linda avoided that gaze. The oldest security guard, named Stephen, began. We will proceed to take a full incident report. Mrs. Carmichael, please state your reasons for accusing this girl of endangerment. Linda exhaled sharply. A long sigh, like someone deciding between lying again or admitting something she didn't want to face. I noticed she was behaving strangely. She was holding her backpack too tightly. She was looking at me, avoiding me. Ava interrupted gently, her voice calm but sharp. That's the attitude of an one-year-old flying alone. Harper squeezed her mother's hand and moved closer. Linda was startled by the interruption, but Ava kept her voice steady. Go on, Mrs. Carmichael. Linda took a deep breath. I just thought, he's not like the usual kid seen here. A few murmurs broke out in the cabin. A passenger in seat 2B whispered, What is this first class? Another person replied, That doesn't sound right at all. Linda blushed. I didn't mean it like that. Ava didn't take her eyes off Linda. So what do you mean? Linda stammered. Something that had never happened to her before. I just found it suspicious. That's all. Stephen asked again, his voice serious. What evidence do you have that the baby is dangerous? Linda bit her lip. No evidence, Ava repeated blandly. Then why did you call security? Linda swallowed. Because I was worried about the flight. These days, you never know. Ava raised her eyebrows. These days? You mean these days when black children aren't allowed to sit in first class without scaring someone? Space seemed frozen. Linda immediately defended. No way, I'm not racist. Ava didn't argue. She just sighed. People always say that first. That statement is not meant to hurt. It is simply a truth that has been passed down through the generations. Linda looked confused, like someone caught in front of a mirror, seeing her real face for the first time without being prepared. Stephen continued, his voice clear. Miss Carmichael making false accusations about passengers, especially minors, is serious. It delays flights and triggers emergency procedures. Linda blinked repeatedly. I didn't know it would turn out like this. Ava looked straight at her and said slowly, but she knew very well that she saw no threat. She saw only a child who did not fit her image of a first-class passenger. Linda turned away as if to avoid his gaze. But the sounds in the compartment continued to surround her judgmental whispers. That's so true, poor kid. Why would you do that? No one would do that to a child. Linda began to feel the truth. No one was on her side. No one. The security guard continued. We need to know exactly what you are basing your report on, because if there is no reasonable basis, it will be recorded as a false complaint. Linda shuddered at those 2 words. Ava looked at her, her voice low, not heavy, but heavy in a way that made the listener feel ashamed. Harper just sat there, in her right seat, and you did everything you could to make a child feel out of place. Harper bent down, her small shoulders shaking slightly. Ava gently rubbed her shoulder, letting Harper know, "You're not wrong, not at all." Linda was silent for a long time. Then she blurted out, "I feel threatened," a statement that is both true and completely false. Ava closed her eyes for a second, as if she had just understood the root of the problem. "You were threatened," Ava repeated. "By a child reading a book," Linda hesitated. "I don't know. I just lost my job. I felt everything was wrong. And when I saw her, Ava was not expecting that at all." The truth dawned like dirt under the snow. The bitterness Linda carried didn't start with Harper. It had been there for a long time, building up and waiting for a weak spot to spill out. But Ava still spoke as soft as a street lamp in the night. "You hurt, I understand. But your pain doesn't allow you to hurt another child." Linda looked up, her eyes slightly red. "I didn't mean to hurt it." Ava looked at Harper. She stood trembling, her fingers still lightly clutching her mother's hand. "But you did." A simple sentence. But Linda immediately looked down. Stephen, in a professional voice, said, "We will be taking a report. Passenger Carmichael may be subject to disciplinary action under airline regulations and may be placed on a special watch list." Linda stiffened. I don't want to be banned from flying," Ava interrupted, still keeping her voice soft. "Nobody wants heavy punishment. We just want this not to happen again." Linda looked up, surprised. Ava continued, "I don't want you to be humiliated. I don't want you to be destroyed. I just want you to face what you did and choose better next time." The whole cabin was silent. That statement, strangely, was not just meant for Linda. It touched several others. A lesson not everyone has the courage to say. Linda turned her face away quickly, wiping the corner of her eyes with her hand, as if she didn't want anyone to see her soften. The whole compartment waited. Then Linda whispered, for the first time since the beginning of the story, in a voice without arrogance, "I am sorry. I was really wrong." Harper heard. She looked up, her eyes still wet. Ava looked down at her child and asked softly, "Do you want to say anything to her?" Harper looked at Linda for a long moment. She was no longer afraid, no longer angry, just sad. "I'm not dangerous. I'm just scared, but I still want to go see Dad. I don't want anyone to be afraid of me anymore." Linda put her hand to her mouth, choking with emotion. No one said anything more. Sometimes, the truth doesn't need many words. It just needs enough courage to step out. Stephen closed the minutes. "Thank you for your cooperation. We will now disembark. The crew may prepare for takeoff again." Michelle breathed a sigh of relief. The passengers breathed a sigh of relief. Harper leaned her head on Ava's shoulder. And Linda sat down in her seat, much smaller than when she entered the plane. But no one looked at her with hatred. There was only a gentle silence, the silence of an airplane cabin that had just learned a great lesson. Ava stroked Harper's hair again, the stroke taking the form of steadfastness and love. "Good boy. The storm has passed." The Atlanta sunlight streamed in through the window so bright that Harper had to close her eyes. But this time, my eyes closed not out of fear, but out of relief. As the security team left the cabin, the plane door closed gently as if trying to smooth over what had just happened. The previously heavy atmosphere suddenly relaxed, like the moment the sun emerged after a long rainstorm. No one said it, but everyone felt it. The loudspeaker announcement sounded this time more normal, not urgent. "Flight attendants prepare for takeoff." Michelle, the chief flight attendant, sighed softly, then turned to Ava and Harper, her voice soft, as if afraid of hurting them more. "Are you and the baby?" "Okay." Ava smiled in, thanks, but there was still a trace of tension in her smile. "Thank you. Thanks a lot. We're fine." Harper sat back in seat 1A, but more slowly than before. She gripped the armrest, then let go, then gripped it again as if testing to see if she was really safe. Ava crouched down to her level, her fingers gently resting on Harper's small hand. "Do you want to move to sit next to me?" Harper shook his head. "I'm okay, Mom. I want to sit where I used to know I don't have to be afraid anymore." Ava looked at her with a mixture of pride and heartache. "I understand. You are much stronger than I thought." Harper smiled softly. a small but genuine smile like a nightlight in a quiet room. Linda was still sitting in seat 1C, only an armrest away from Harper, but the emotional distance between the two of them felt like a long road. Linda sat still for a long time before daring to glance over. Not to pry like before, but to see if Harper was okay. The look was no longer sharp, only shyness mixed with a little pity. Harper felt the gaze. She turned, not smiling, not angry, just looking. Linda opened her mouth, her voice very small. I am really sorry, Harper said nothing. But what she did made not only Ava, but everyone sitting nearby stop. Harper nodded. A small nod, but enough for Linda's shoulders to drop, as if someone had just placed a hand on her shoulder telling her not to try so hard anymore. Ava saw it all. In that moment, Ava understood that Harper had not only survived the accident, she had also survived something much bigger, the fear and hurt that adults inadvertently inflict on children. The plane began to taxi. The engine noise increased, but Harper suddenly thought it sounded more like rain than a roar, soft, steady, reassuring. Ava buckled her seatbelt, then leaned closer to her child. If you don't like the noise when we take off, I'll hold your hand. Harper shook his head, his eyes turned to the window. Today, I want to see the plane take off myself. Ava knew it wasn't stubbornness. It was a child's need to prove to herself that she was no longer afraid of things that shouldn't be afraid of. Harper leaned her head up to the window. The runway stretched out before her, slowly then faster. Her heart followed the accelerating beat. Speed up 1, speed up 2, speed up 3. Harper closed her eyes, but not because she was afraid, but because the moment was so big for her. A new door was opening. Then the plane lifted off the ground. Harper opened his eyes just as the airport headquarters faded below. And that was the moment when the little girl whispered very softly, "I did it." "Mom," Ava heard. She touched her son's shoulder, her hand trembling slightly with emotion. "Yes, you did it." In the cabin, the atmosphere had changed completely. A passenger sitting in seat 2B turned to the person next to him and said, "That girl is strong." "Yeah, I've never seen a kid so calm." And her mother, God, if I had half the calmness she has, my life would be so different. These whispers weren't meant to be pressuring. They were more like testimonies of a moment of kindness, something that's sometimes all too rare on modern flights. Michelle, the chief flight attendant, walked slowly past the row of seats, then leaned down close to Ava. "I just wanted to say, I really admire the way you handled everything." Ava smiled. "Thank you. I was just doing what any mother would do." Michelle shook her head. "Not everyone can keep calm like that." Ava just smiled softly, saying nothing more. But inside, she knew clearly. To keep calm, she had to suppress so many old memories, so many nameless emotions of a childhood that had been overlooked for reasons she never chose. Harper leaned her head back in her chair. But instead of closing her eyes, she opened the book again. Not to escape into another world, but to pick up where she left off before her unjust judgment. Ava looked at her child, reading, and felt lighter. After a moment, Harper put down the book and turned to Ava. "Mom, what if that woman hates me?" Ava placed her hand on her child's cheek and spoke honestly, but softly. "She doesn't hate you. She's just afraid of what she doesn't understand. And adults sometimes make mistakes with fear." Harper pondered. "But it's not my fault." "No." Ava nodded. "But there are mistakes that are not yours, that will pass if you remain kind." Harper muttered. "I don't want anyone to be afraid of me anymore. I just want peace." Ava smiled and stroked her child's nose. "Then you did everything right. You were kind. You were brave. You just didn't let others define your worth." Harper leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "Mom, I'm glad you came in time." Ava squeezed her child's hand gently. "Mom always makes it, no matter what." After a while, Linda turned around slightly as if she was debating whether or not to speak. Finally, she immediately gathered all the courage she had left and asked Mrs. Johnson, "May I have a word?" Ava looked at her. Not hatefully, not coldly. Just an observation from someone who knows better than anyone that facing the truth is the most painful process for a human being. Linda took a deep breath. I was wrong. But not just because I saw her differently. I was wrong because I let my bitterness hurt others. I had no right to do that." Ava looked at her for a few seconds. Then she said softly, realizing that is sometimes more important than apologizing. Linda smiled slightly, a bitter but true smile. We'll try not to let that happen again. Ava nodded. I hope so. No harsh words, no retaliation, just a soft ending, the kind that leaves you thinking long after the plane lands. The plane cabin gradually fell into silence, a silence not because nothing happened, but a silence after the truth was exposed, called by its name, and healed with small but sincere actions. Harper reopened the book. Ava looked out the window. And Linda, for the first time in years, sat still, not feeling like she had any right to judge. The plane took to the sky, carrying not only passengers but also a story of fear, expectation, vulnerability, and most of all, of kindness. A storm has passed, but its echoes are creating something new in every person on that flight. As the plane stabilized at cruising altitude, sunlight filtered through thick clouds and bathed the first-class cabin in a soft yellow light. The light felt incredibly peaceful, as if the storm had never even happened. But for Harper, the peace on the outside couldn't quell the tremors that continued to run under her skin. She sat up straight, her eyes still on the book, but she couldn't read a single line. The words kept blurring and disappearing. Harper felt like a window that hadn't been closed, yet the wind was seeping through, making her heart flutter. Ava looked at her child and knew immediately that Harper wasn't really reading. Mothers have a special sense they sense their children's silence better than any words. Ava placed her hand gently on her daughter's hand. What are you thinking? Harper pursed his lips, and after a while said, I thought, when you came, everything would stop being scary. But I still feel like something is stuck inside me. Ava didn't respond right away. Stories of emotional trauma, especially trauma involving misjudgment, couldn't be resolved with simple placations. Ava pulled her chair closer and put her arm around her son's shoulder. Fear isn't something that goes away, Harper. It's like an echo. Even though the sound has stopped, the echo remains for a while. Harper leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Mom, did I do something wrong? A very light question, but it stabbed Ava's heart like a painful needle. Ava replied, her voice slow and weighty. No, Harper, you're not wrong. It's how people see you, not you. Harper let out a breath, but it wasn't exactly relief. It was a breath of disappointment at the world, a disappointment no 11-year-old should know. Mom, why do people still think I'm dangerous just because I'm sitting still? Ava stroked her child's hair, her smile slightly sad. Because sometimes, Harper, people are afraid of what they don't understand. They're not used to seeing a black kid in first class. They think it's not for you. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they're used to the same old framework, Harper pondered. But I didn't choose the color of my skin. Ava placed her hand on her child's cheek, her voice filled with gentle determination. No, but you can choose how you deal with people who don't understand you. You did a great job of that today. Harper looked at her mother, her eyes clear but still worried. Really, Mom, I feel so nervous. Ava smiled. I was shaking. But I stood tall. That was bravery. Harper took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. I just want to be me. Ava hugged her child closer, and you deserve it. No matter where you sit, what flight you take, or who you meet. Michelle, the chief flight attendant, approached gently like an old friend who didn't want to bother her. She bent down. Harper, the pilot, wants to apologize for earlier. When you're ready, I can show you the cockpit. It'll only be a few minutes. Harper started. Her eyes lit up not with an overly cheerful light, but with the light of a child recovering from a painful touch. Ava asked softly, Do you want to go? Harper nodded. I want to try, but can I come with you? Of course. Michelle smiled warmly. I will take you too. When they entered the cockpit, Harper gasped. So many buttons, so many screens, blue lights, orange lights, white lights. The captain, a gentle-faced Asian man, turned back and smiled slightly. Hello, Harper. I heard you were very brave earlier. Harper was embarrassed and grabbed her mother's sleeve. The pilot continued. You know, I used to be like you. When I was a kid, people always told me that someone like me couldn't be a pilot. But I didn't stop. Today, you're flying with me. Harper opened her eyes wide. Another adult, like Mom, knows that feeling. The feeling of being told you don't belong where you are. Harper took a small breath. Uncle, are you scared when I say that? Yes, the pilot replied truthfully. But I learned not to believe what people said about me. I believed what I knew about myself. Harper nodded slightly. The words touched her like a soft cloth placed over a cut, not taking away the pain but making it easier to breathe. When Harper returned to her seat, she looked calmer, not less scared but braver enough to admit she was scared. Ava leaned over. "What do you think?" Harper looked out the window, smiling very slightly. "I think I'll be okay. Maybe for a while. I don't remember too many bad things." Ava smiled softly. "But I remember. So when you need me, I can remind you how strong you are." Harper leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I love you, Mom." Ava hugged her child, her voice soft but deep. "I love you too, Harper. I love you so much that I won't let anyone take away your peace." The cabin felt strangely warm, not just between mother and child, but among the other passengers. For the first time, the passengers had witnessed such a level-headed confrontation between a child and an adult. No one said it, but everyone knew. They learned something today, even though no one expected it. After a long while, Linda stood up. She walked slowly to the mother and daughter, stopping at a respectful distance. Ava looked up. Linda said, her voice hoarse, "No longer sharp, Mrs. Johnson. I'm trying to understand why I reacted like that. I think I lost myself a long time ago," Ava replied softly. "When people feel like they have no place to stand, they find a place to attack." "I understand." Linda bowed her head. "I will find a way to change myself. Not because I am afraid of being punished, but because I don't want to be the one to make a child cry again." Ava nodded, realizing that is the first step. Linda looked at Harper and spoke clearly. "Thank you for not hating me." Harper replied very softly, "I just want people to be kinder, to me, and to each other." Linda choked. She stepped back, returning to her seat. Ava watched, neither happy nor satisfied. Just calm, the calm of someone who knows that sometimes winning is not about making others lose, but about making them change. The plane continued toward New York. Harper opened the book again, this time reading every word. Ava looked at her child, her heart softening. A long day. A day that forced mother and daughter to face old fears and overcome them. No applause needed. No recognition needed. Just peace. And Harper has begun to find that again. As the plane began its descent into New York, the light outside the window faded to a soft orange of evening. Harper looked out at the horizon, seeing the Manhattan skyscrapers glow like giant Lego blocks in the twilight. The girl tilted her head and whispered, "Mom, it's here." Ava smiled her hand, gently rubbing her child's back. "Yes, New York is always beautiful at this time of day." Harper rested her head on her mother's shoulder. But there was another feeling in the peacefulness, a mixture of anticipation and worry. "See you soon, Dad. It's been 2 months." Ava looked at her son, seeing something flicker in Harper's eyes. "You miss Dad a lot, don't you?" Harper bit her lip. "Yes, I do. But I'm also a bit scared." Ava touched her child's neck, her voice soft. "Scared about the matter between your parents." Harper didn't reply, but her tiny nod said it all. Ava squeezed her son's hand, reassuring him. "Whatever happened between you two was never your fault. And wherever you are always loved." Harper nodded slightly. But in her eyes, the old questions arose. The questions a child doesn't want to ask, but can't help but think. Why don't you and Mom live together like before? Did I do something wrong? Or am I not good enough? Ava saw it all in Harper's eyes, and her heart sank. As the plane touched down, everyone in the cabin seemed to exhale at the same time. Not because the flight was long, but because they had just witnessed a story they would remember for a long time. Michelle came to bow to Ava. "Mrs. Johnson, Harper, thank you both for your kindness. Things like today don't always end this well." Ava took Michelle's hand, thanking her sincerely. Harper gave Michelle a gentle hug, which surprised the flight attendant. "Thank you for protecting me," Harper said softly. Michelle gently touched Harper's back. "I protected myself very well." Linda stood in the aisle, her hand on the strap of her bag, her eyes on the floor as if she were carrying an invisible burden. As they passed, Harper looked at her for a moment. Linda said loud enough for only the two of them to hear, "I hope you have a good visit to your father." Harper smiled, not widely, but warmly. "I also hope you will have better days." Linda chuckled a wet, light laugh. Just that one sentence made Linda understand that children's kindness is sometimes deeper than adults imagine. As Harper stepped off the plane, she was ushered through the VIP area. Ava followed her, but her heart wasn't as heavy as it had been when she'd boarded the plane that morning. Harper stepped out the glass door, and there, her father was waiting. Ethan Johnson, tall, athletic, wearing a navy trench coat. When he saw Harper, his eyes lit up like a light bulb in a dark room. Harper. He opened his arms. Harper ran over. Dad. Ethan held her close to his chest, lifting her slightly like he had done since she was a baby. I miss you so much. Harper buried her face in her father's shoulder, her voice choked. I miss you too, Dad. Ava stood a few steps away, giving the father and daughter a moment alone. Even though they had some scratches, Ava never wanted those wounds to spread to Harper. Ethan put Harper down and turned to Ava. Ava, thank you for bringing the child. Ava nodded slightly. Her voice was calm. The trip was a bit bumpy. But it's okay. Ethan frowned. What happened? Are you okay? Harper interrupted, speaking quickly as if afraid her father would misunderstand. I'm fine. I just had a bad idea about that lady on the plane. Ava put her hand on Harper's shoulder, signaling that she didn't need to tell him anything that was tiring her. Ethan looked at Ava. Is something serious? Ava replied. It was just a misunderstanding. But Harper was very strong. Ethan looked down at his son. My daughter, very brave. Harper smiled, a full, clear smile this time. As they stepped out into the arrivals area, the cold New York wind hit Harper's face. She zipped up her jacket almost reflexively. Ethan held his son's hand. Harper, how about we go out to dinner? I have reservations at your favorite restaurant. Harper nodded immediately. Ava looked at that scene, her heart sinking a little, not because of sadness, but because of the simple truth. The two people who love their children the most sometimes can no longer love each other. Ava said, Mom, we'll get the luggage and then go back to the hotel. You go with Dad. Harper turned back and hugged her mother again. Longer than usual. Mom, thank you for coming to me when I was scared. Ava nodded lightly on her son's shoulder. I'll always be there, wherever you are. Harper let go but didn't leave right away. She looked at her mother as if she wanted to ask something no one teaches children to ask, but life makes them think about Mom and Dad. Are you sad not living together? Ava looked deep into her son's eyes. No avoidance, no false comfort. Mom and Dad, there are many things that take time to understand, but we still love you the same. Nothing about you has changed, Ethan added. And you don't have to worry about us. Just be Harper, that's enough. Harper breathed a sigh of relief. It was like a small stone had been lifted from the palm of his hand. The little girl held her father's hand and turned to wave to her mother. I'll call you later, Mom, Ava waved back. Remember to eat well. As Harper and Ethan walked away, Ava stood alone in the lobby. The flow of people was like a city wave, loud, hurried, colorful. But Ava didn't feel chaos, just feel light. It had been a long day, but she had protected her child. And more importantly, Harper had learned that fear wasn't something to be hidden, but something to be walked through. Michelle, the head flight attendant, walked by and caught sight of Ava. I don't know what you're thinking, but you did something wonderful today. Ava smiled. It's amazing. I don't know if it's true. I just know I have to. Michelle tilted her head. You know, I think Harper will grow up to be just like you, calm, strong, and know how to stop the storm. Ava chuckled. I just want her to be herself. Michelle nodded, and today, she started to do that. Ava looked out the hall door where Harper and her father were walking away. Her heart, though sometimes aching from unhealed things, felt strangely at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because today, in the middle of New York, she saw her daughter walking stronger than before, and that was the greatest hope Ava could have hoped for. Hudson and Pine, a restaurant on the corner of 53rd Street, was a place Ethan often took Harper to whenever she visited New York. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, with red brick walls and soft yellow lighting that made one feel like they were entering a place familiar enough and private enough. Harper loves this place because they have the star-shaped grilled cheese sandwich she loved since she was little. Ethan loves this place because every time he sees Harper bite into that sandwich, her eyes light up just like the first day he brought her there. Harper was only 5 years old that year. When the father and son walked in, the familiar waiter smiled. Harper is here. Do you want a star or a heart today? Harper laughed, the small scarf around her neck shaking. Star, but I'd like a large cup of hot chocolate too. Ethan teased. Don't make it too big or the baby will have trouble sleeping at night. Harper pouted. Dad, I'm 11. I can control it. Ava let out a small laugh, a laugh that made Ethan glance over. It was a small moment. But for a split second, they both saw the old days again. The days when they stood together in small cafes like this, their hands full of hospital papers, their eyes tired but their hearts beating as one. A moment. Then gone. A table was set near the window overlooking Midtown. Harper sank into the comfortable chair, her hands cupping the mug of hot chocolate she had just set down. Dad, I want to eat French fries today. Can I have some? Mom, Ava shrugged. You were so brave today. You can eat anything, Harper exclaimed. Then order more potatoes. Ethan gave a high five. French fries ally here. In that moment, Harper felt like she was sitting in a small version of family, imperfect, incomplete, but warm in its own way. Waiting for the food, Ethan looked at Ava for a long time before speaking, his voice deeper than usual. I heard part of what Harper told me on the plane, but not the whole story. Are you okay? Ava gently swirled her glass of water, her eyes as calm as a lake. Fine, the way I'm supposed to be. Ethan nodded. He understood that saying better than anyone. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were scared. Ava shook her head. No one could have predicted this. The important thing is that you're okay. But deep inside, Ava still felt an unnamed weariness, the weariness of a mother who had to protect her child while fighting against the invisible wounds of life. Harper glanced back and forth between her parents, a childish but quietly sensitive gaze. Mom and Dad, are you angry with each other? That question made both adults silent for a few seconds. Ethan put his hand on Harper's hand. No, daughter, we are not angry with each other. Ava continued, her voice soft as if putting another blanket over the worry in her heart. Mom and Dad just have different views, but not angry. Harper exhaled. The moment was enough to make her feel lighter. But Ethan looked at Ava longer than he should have. The man, even though they were divorced, could see that Ava was hiding something. A kind of tiredness, a kind of loneliness. As Harper bent down to play with her napkin, Ethan whispered, Ava, you don't have to bear everything alone. Ava paused slightly. Ethan, I can take care of Harper. I'm fine. I'm not saying you can't do it, Ethan replied more gently. I'm just saying, you don't have to do it all alone. Ava was silent. Sometimes the simplest sentences hit the nail on the head. Harper looked up. You're not alone, Mom. I'm here. Both adults laughed, but Ava's smile trembled slightly. It was as if she had peeled back a layer she didn't know she had. When the food arrived, the atmosphere began to lighten. Harper ate with gusto, the fries crispy, the cheese melted, her eyes sparkling in a childlike way. But amid the soft sounds of cutlery, Ava suddenly remembered Harper's eyes when she asked in the airport, Mom and Dad, are you sad not living together? The question cut deep. A pain Ava thought she was familiar with but had never really reached the bottom of. She put down the glass of water and said, Harper, I want to talk to you and Dad about this. Harper stopped eating. Ethan looked at Ava calmly, waiting for more. Ava took a deep breath, then said, Today on the plane when it happened, I saw Harper was scared. Scared of being misunderstood, scared of being judged, scared of not having anyone on her side. Harper bowed his head. She was right. Ava continued, and I realized the divorce wasn't what upset me the most. What I feared the most was Harper thinking that Mom and Dad were breaking up because of you. Harper opened her eyes wide. I did think so, she said very softly, as if the secret was taken out of the heart after a long time of hiding. Ava pulled a chair closer to Harper. No, daughter, that would never happen. Ethan spoke, his voice steady, deep, and clear. Mom and Dad broke up because we didn't understand each other like before. But the love we have for you hasn't diminished one bit. Harper bit her lip. But when I'm not with one of you, I'm afraid that person will be sad. Ava paused. Ethan said softly, Harper, adults being sad is an adult's problem. You don't have to help your parents with their sadness. Harper squinted. But I want you to be happy, like before. Ava touched her cheek. You make your parents happy every day. It's just that happiness now has two roofs to live under. Harper nodded slowly as if sorting through the emotional stones in his head. The meal continued, but the atmosphere between the three became different, lighter, more genuine. When they finished eating, Ethan suggested, Harper, do you want to take a walk around Bryant Park? The lights are really pretty. Harper's eyes lit up. Do you have music, Dad? Yes. And there's a hot chocolate cart, too. Ava looked at her child and nodded. Go. But remember to wear a scarf, it's cold at night. Harper hugged her mother and ran outside, first waiting in front of the glass door. 2 adults left. Ethan Quay sang Ava. Ava, I want to ask something. Ava tilted her head slightly. What are you happy? Really? The question was so profound that Ava could not answer it immediately. A moment later she said, I am happy to see Harper grow up, to see her safe, strong, and able to stand up for herself. As for me, I am still learning to be happy with this new version of my life. Ethan looked at her for a long time. Ava, you don't have to be strong all the time. You have the right to be tired. She smiled softly. Tired is tired, but not collapsed. Ethan exhaled, half smiling, half sad. That is what makes me always respect you. Ava stood up and put on her coat. Let's go. Harper, wait. As they stepped outside, Harper ran up and took each of their hands, one left, one right, like a small bridge. Can you come with me? Ava and Ethan looked at each other, then they nodded. Today is fine, Ava said, because today I was strong. And amidst the city lights, 3 people walked along the street, no longer the old family, but still a family in its own way. Harper frolicked in the middle, her hands clasped tightly at her sides, as if she believed that if she just held on to this hand, nothing in the world could ever scare her again. Bryant Park at night is like a brilliant carpet of light. Strings of round bulbs hanging from tree branches cast a thin layer of snow on the ground, making the entire park look like a fairy tale painting in the middle of Manhattan. Harper ran a few steps forward and then turned to look at her parents. She spread her arms and spun around like a child who had just found her own warmth. Beautiful Harper, exclaimed, her voice carrying in the cold wind. Ava stood far away, looking at her child, her eyes softening. Ethan put his hands in his coat pockets, looking at Harper in a fatherly way before finally breathing a sigh of relief. Look, Mom and Dad. Harper ran to a hot chocolate stand and waved. Ethan laughed. If we continue with chocolate, we won't be able to sleep tonight. Harper squinted. It's okay. Today is special. Ava looked at her child and nodded. Okay, but just a small cup. Harper blinked. Small, but with a lot of whipped cream, please. Ava laughed. Okay. In that moment, Ava realized there are actually very simple happinesses, like seeing your child smile completely without any trace of fear or hurt. After shopping, Harper sat down on a wooden bench, her legs swinging in the cool breeze. Ava and Ethan sat on either side. The yellow light cast a soft glow on the 3 of them. Harper took a sip of chocolate and said, Mom, I learned something today. Ava tilted her head. What is it, son? Harper looked into the cup of chocolate as if seeing herself on the flight when she was scared. It's, sometimes people hate you, not because you did anything wrong. It's because they look at you unfairly. Ethan spoke warmly. That's right. I'm not wrong. I'm just me. Harper was silent for a few seconds, then continued. But what makes me sad the most is not that. It's when I'm scared. I feel like I'm alone. Ava put her hand on her son's shoulder. Harper, you were not alone today. You had Mom, Dad, Michelle, and even strangers standing by you. Harper looked up at Ava, eyes that seemed to want to believe but still held a hint of reserve. And Ava understood. A child's wounds small but deep. Ethan placed a large, warm hand on Harper's back. My child, you have the right to be afraid, but you also have the right to be protected. And your mother and I will always do that, even if we don't live together. Harper leaned her head gently on Ava's shoulder. I know. It's just, today was such a big deal. I feel tired inside. Ava stroked her child's hair. It's normal to be tired, but you got through it. You're better than you think. Harper pursed his lips, then suddenly asked, Mom, are you scared? Ava paused. Yes, she was scared. More scared than she was in the $1,000,000 meetings. More scared than she was racing to save a patient. Scared that her daughter, the child she loved most in her life, was being dragged into the prejudices she had fought against for so many years. But Ava didn't want Harper to see that weakness. She chose to tell the truth, but with a truth gentle enough for her child to embrace. I am afraid. But that fear is never greater than protecting you. Harper smiled, a small smile as bright as the lights on the Christmas tree in front of her. The wind from the avenue made Harper shiver. Ethan immediately took off his scarf and wrapped it around her neck. Dad, I'm fine. I know. But I want you to be warm. That simple moment made Ava look at Ethan longer. They had both been through a marriage that was no longer enough to bond, but Ethan's love for his son was as clear as the city lights. "Thank you," Ava said. Ethan nodded, "No thanks." But Ava shook her head, "Yes. Thanks for coming today. I need both Mom and Dad." Ethan sighed softly. "I will come more often, if you let me." The air was still. Not tense, but a thin layer of emotion was being peeled away. Ava looked out at the Bryant Park ice rink. Children were skating, occasionally falling, but quickly getting back up. Like Harper, and like herself. "I'm not stopping you," Ava said. "I just don't know how to do things without making the puppet more of a mess." Ethan nodded. "Understood. I don't need you to change anything right now," he said quietly. "I just want us to continue learning how to be better parents together, even if we're not married." Ava smiled softly. "So, let's learn from the beginning." Harper sat between the two adults, listening and understanding everything in the way of an intelligent and sensitive child. The little girl held both of their hands and shouted, "I think you're doing well." Ethan laughed. Ava touched her forehead to Harper's. "If you say so, it must be true." It was getting late. Harper started yawning. Ethan looked at his watch. "I'll take you two home." Ava nodded. They left Bryant Park, walking through the yellow lights of the sidewalk. Harper leaned on Ava's shoulder, eyes half closed. "I'm sleepy," she whispered. Ava hugged her child closer. "Go to sleep, baby." After walking a few steps, Harper said with a yawn, "Today, I'm not afraid of planes anymore, Mom." Ava smiled, a small smile that was as bright as a fire in the night. "I proved it today." Harper closed his eyes and whispered, "Because I know you will come." A sentence made Ava's steps slow down. Ethan turned away, pretending to look at the road to hide the emotion in his eyes. Ava bent down and kissed her son on the forehead. "I will always come, Harper, no matter how far." When they arrived at the hotel, Ethan helped Ava carry Harper into the elevator. The doors closed softly. Ava Quay sang Ethan, "Thank you for not letting me face it alone." Ethan looked at her, his voice low but sincere. "Thank you for always standing up for me." Ava nodded, smiling this time, a smile without defense, without distance. "Good night, Ethan. Good night, Ava." The elevator opened. Ava carried Harper out, walking down a long hallway lit by warm yellow lights. The doors closed behind them, taking with them a day full of turmoil and healing. The day Harper learned that she was not wrong, that her worth was not in the eyes of others. And Ava learns that no matter how strong she is, she still has the right to lean on others when it makes her daughter safer, more stable. That night, before turning off the lights, Ava stood by the window looking at the sparkling New York City below her feet. She whispered, "I'm proud of you today, Harper. Very proud." Harper slept soundly, her breathing soft as snow. Ava put her hand on the glass door. Not the end, just a new sky opening up. Harper and Ava's story is more than just a reflection of an incident on a flight. It touches on very real things that all of us, especially those who are halfway through our lives, have encountered: prejudiced looks, hasty judgments, and moments when we have to stand up for the ones we love. What matters most, perhaps, is not which arguments we win, but whether we maintain kindness, calm, and dignity in each choice. Ava, the strong mother, does not scream, does not retaliate, but does not back down either. Her calmness reminds us, true strength lies not in a loud voice, but in a strong heart. Harper demonstrates another lesson children feel deeply, and small hurts can stay with them for a long time. So every adult has a responsibility to create a less judgmental and safer world for the children around us, whether our own children, grandchildren, or strangers. Linda, the woman who caused the incident, reminds us that sometimes the person who hurts others is not a bad person, but just a person who is not awake enough. Everyone has times when they are tired and disoriented. And sometimes a small word of forgiveness from another person is the beginning of a big change in oneself. Ultimately, the story teaches us something simple yet profound. In life, the most healing thing is understanding and choosing kindness, no matter the circumstances. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this emotional story. Every view, every listen, every reflection is the motivation for us to continue bringing stories that touch the heart and reveal the beauty in life. If you find the story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you truly. Wishing you peace and wonderful days.